Rain swept across Manhattan in long silver strokes that turned the skyline into a trembling watercolor, blurring towers and taxi lights into one restless ocean of gold and gray. On the rooftop terrace of the Helios Tower, where the city's richest gathered beneath chandeliers and whispered about power like it was oxygen, Aiden Vale stepped into the storm as if he needed it to breathe. The fundraiser behind him buzzed with political favors and champagne promises, but he no longer had the patience to pretend he belonged among them. He loosened his tie and exhaled, letting the wind cool the heat that had been burning in his chest ever since he finished his polite but razor-sharp exchange with Victor Hale, the man who had spent the last 5 years turning business into blood sport. Aiden was used to enemies, but Victor made rivalry feel personal, as if every deal between them carried old wounds neither had spoken aloud. Aiden rubbed a hand over the back of his neck and looked out at the storm-soaked city. For a moment it felt like the only honest thing in sight. Then he saw her, a girl barely more than a silhouette at first small, against the vastness of the skyline, standing near the terrace railing, with her hair clinging damply to her shoulders and her dress darkened by rain. She did not fit the scene. She was not drunk, not flirting, not laughing in glittery clusters like the other socialites inside. She stood alone, hugging herself, trembling, like someone who had run from something she could not name. Aiden froze, struck by a feeling he had not felt in years, recognition without understanding. He approached slowly, not wanting to scare her. The storm muffled the sound of his footsteps, but she must have sensed him because she turned just as he reached her side. Her eyes, framed by wet lashes, widened with a mixture of startle and vulnerability. She looked young but not naive, lost but not weak, and heartbreakingly tired. For a moment, the two simply stared at each other, rain sliding down their faces like shared grief. Then, in a voice barely louder than the wind, she whispered, "Do you ever feel like your life stops belonging to you?" The question hit him harder than anything Victor Hale had said that night. He swallowed before answering, "Yes, more often than anyone thinks." Her breath caught as if she had been holding that question inside for years. She looked away, shoulders shaking hands, gripping the railing until her knuckles whitened through the rain. He wanted to ask who she was, why she was crying, who had hurt her, but something told him to stay silent, to let her speak first if she wanted to. When she finally did, her voice cracked like thin glass. "My father tried to introduce me to a man tonight. Someone older, someone powerful, someone I am supposed to smile at and pretend I want." Aiden felt a flicker of anger, not at her, but at the cruelty of expectation. The rooftop lights flickered, then went out, plunging the terrace into darkness as the emergency system triggered. A gust of wind shoved the door shut behind them. Locking automatically from the inside, they were trapped in the stairwell. The only light coming from a single dim emergency bulb above their heads. The intimacy of the shadows tightened around them as if the storm itself had carved a small world for two strangers to breathe in together. She hugged her arms around herself, teeth chattering from cold and fear. "I did not mean to get stuck," she whispered. "I just needed to get away for a moment. I felt like I could not breathe." He removed his suit jacket and placed it gently around her shoulders. She hesitated only a moment before, pulling it close, the fabric enveloping her like warmth in the middle of winter. "You are freezing," Aiden murmured. Her lips trembled. "It has been a long night." He leaned against the stairwell wall, watching her with quiet, careful attention. He could see the outline of her heartbeat beneath the thin dress, the way her breath hitched each time thunder cracked. Outside the way she kept wiping at her cheeks, as if embarrassed by her own tears. She did not look like someone who belonged to the ruthless world upstairs. She looked like someone trapped inside it. He asked softly, "What were you running from?" Her laugh was soft and bitter, not running, escaping. Aiden took a step closer, drawn by something he could not explain. "Tell me what happened if you want. If you do not want, I can sit here in silence with you." She lifted her eyes slowly, really looking at him for the first time. And something in her expression softened as if she suddenly realized she was safe with him. "Even though she did not know his name, I feel like my whole life is planned," she said. "My school, my future, my relationships. Everything decided for me before I even get to want anything." Her voice cracked again. "Tonight, I just wanted one moment where I could decide for myself." He understood that feeling too well. His parents had died early, leaving him a company and destiny before he was ready. People saw his wealth, not the cage around it. He had spent years fighting decisions made in his name before he learned how to make his own. And tonight this girl was fighting her first battle with a life that demanded obedience. He reached out gently, brushing a raindrop or tear from her cheek. For the first time, she did not pull back. "Do you want to talk about it?" Her breath shook. "I do not want to talk. I just do not want to feel alone." Aiden stepped closer, just enough that their breaths mingled their shadows, overlapping on the wet stairwell floor. The storm rumbled above them, but inside it felt strangely still, as if everything had narrowed to the distance. Between his hand and hers, she whispered, "What am I doing here? I should go back, but I cannot." Aiden replied, "Then stay here for a moment. Stay until you can breathe again." Her eyes softened. Aiden. For the first time, she said his name, though he had never told her it. She blinked, confused, as the realization hit her, and he blinked too, as if he had not meant to reveal anything about himself yet. Somehow she already held pieces of him. She reached up trembling fingers, brushing his jaw, and when their skin touched, everything in the stairwell changed. The air thickened, their chests tightened, the space between them dissolved. She leaned in, first a breath, a question, a plea, and he answered without thinking, pressing his forehead gently to hers, letting the storm outside drown the world until there was only warmth and trembling, and two strangers who suddenly did not feel like strangers anymore. When dawn came, she was gone, leaving his jacket folded on the stair, and a single truth echoing in his chest. Nothing about last night should have happened, and yet nothing in his life had ever felt more real. Aiden Vale had never been the type to lose sleep over a woman yet for the next 7 nights. After the storm trapped him in that stairwell with the mysterious girl, he could not close his eyes without seeing her face, lit by the faint emergency bulb, or hearing the way her voice cracked when she said she felt like her life no longer belonged to her. He returned to the rooftop 3 times that week, each time knowing she would not be there yet. Still searching for the faintest hint of her scent, the outline of her silhouette, the warmth that had pressed against him for a brief, trembling moment before dawn. His assistant, Nora, had noticed the shadows under his eyes by day. "Too, sir, you look like you spent the night fighting an algorithm and losing." Aiden dismissed it with a wave, even though he knew it was not work haunting him. Not veil works, not deadlines, not mergers. It was her, the girl, who had not given him a name, not even a clue. except for the delicate silver necklace that glinted against her collarbone when she turned toward him in the dark. A necklace he remembered with disturbing clarity, the shape of the charm, the way she kept touching it like it grounded her. He had met thousands of women in his 36 years, all polished, all perfect, all carefully curated by wealth and society. Not one of them had left him undone, the way a stranger with trembling shoulders and rain-soaked hair had done in less than an hour. By the 8th morning, he walked into the glass tower of Veilworks with a jaw so tight, Nora did not bother teasing him. She simply handed him his schedule and murmured carefully, "There is an emergency board meeting in 20 minutes. Victor Hale has moved." Aiden froze. Hale always moved aggressively, but never without warning. What now? Nora swallowed. The rumors are true. Hale Corp is preparing a hostile push to buy up all the green tech startups Veilworks has been quietly investing in. If he succeeds, he will undercut every major project you have planned for the next decade. Aiden cursed under his breath, sharp enough to sting. Nothing Hale did surprised him, but this was more than a business play. This was war, the real kind, the kind that stole opportunity and burned bridges and turned cities into graveyards of shattered dreams. Yet even as he marched into the boardroom, prepared to tear apart every strategy Hale could throw at him, there was still space in the back of his mind where she lived, the girl. From the stairwell, the girl who asked him if he ever felt like he did not own his own life. The board meeting lasted 3 brutal hours, filled with analysts forecasting doom and executives fighting over the best counterattacks. Aiden listened, but his mind kept drifting back to the soft tremor in her voice when she said she felt like she was suffocating. He should not care. He should not even remember her. Yet here he was building battle plans in his head, while also wondering if she had eaten breakfast, if she had slept, if she was still crying alone on someone else's rooftop. By late afternoon, he dismissed the board and retreated to his private office high above Midtown, a space with floor-to-ceiling windows and almost no furniture except a desk, a chair, and the quiet that came with power. He closed his eyes, letting the city hum beneath him. The truth he had refused to admit finally slipped through the cracks of his discipline. A night like that does not just happen. People do not collide like that for nothing. He had always believed the world ran on logic, strategy, preparation, but last night had been none of those things. It had been chaos, raw, inconvenient, unforgettable chaos, and he wanted more of it. He spent the next 2 days asking around discreetly, speaking to the rooftop staff, the event coordinators, even the valet team. No one recalled a young woman with rain-soaked hair and trembling eyes. No one remembered seeing her leave. No one could identify a girl matching her description. It was as if she had been carved from the storm, then vanished with it. By the 3rd day, he gave Nora a single instruction without explanation. Find every guest list from last Saturday, anyone who attended the Hale Gala, anyone who may have slipped upstairs. Nora blinked. "Sir, that is over 400 people. And we are cross-checking them with what exactly?" Aiden hesitated, unable to explain that he was looking for a pair of eyes, not a name. If he said that out loud, he would sound unhinged. He simply replied, "Start with anyone under 30. Nora raised a brow but nodded, "Yes, sir." While his team began combing the impossible, he threw himself back into the business war brewing across the city. The next morning, Forbes published an article titled, "The Empire Clash Veilworks versus Hale Corp, Who Will Dominate the Next Decade." Aiden barely skimmed it. The press loved rivalry. They loved painting him as the cold, calculating billionaire who never cracked, who never lost, who never second-guessed. They would be shocked to know the truth. He had cracked, he had lost sleep, and he was second-guessing everything, especially why the feel of her fingers brushing his jaw still lingered like a burn. When evening arrived, he was supposed to attend a private political fundraiser, but the idea of being trapped in another room full of men who viewed women as currency made his stomach twist. He almost canceled, but something nudged at him, an intuition, sharp as instinct, so he went dressed in black once again, wearing the armor his world required. The ballroom was even louder than the one from the rooftop gala heat, packed with donors, journalists, senators, and corporate giants. Yet Aiden's attention cut straight through the crowd because something felt familiar, a tremble at the edge of his awareness, as if the storm from that night had followed him and was about to break open again. He turned toward the west balcony, and his breath caught hard enough to hurt. There she was. Her hair was dry now, falling in soft waves down her back. Her eyes no longer swollen from crying. Her dress elegant, shimmering under the chandelier lights. She looked composed on the outside, but he could see the tension in her hands, the way she kept twisting her silver necklace, the same one he had memorized the night she whispered about losing her life. He took a step forward, the crowd blurring the noise, fading the world, sharpening to just one truth. She is here. The girl who left before dawn, the girl who haunted him, the girl he still did not know the name of. She turned slightly, and for a moment, their eyes met, her lips parted in shock, her breath faltering, her hand rising instinctively as if to touch something that was no longer there. The stairwell, the storm, the heat of his jacket around her shoulders. Recognition hit both of them at once, like lightning in the bloodstream. Aiden moved toward her, threading through the crowd, with a steadiness that hid the storm inside him. She froze rooted to the marble floor, her chest rising and falling too quickly, her fingers trembling against the necklace as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. When he finally reached her, their world shrank to silence, and the 3 longest words of his life burned on his tongue. "We meet again," but she whispered first one word, barely breathed, "Aiden." And the sound of his name in her voice shattered every rule he had ever lived by, every line he had sworn not to cross, every belief that fate did not exist. She was not supposed to be here, not in his world, not in this war, not standing inches from him with eyes that remembered every second of the night she had run from. Aiden Vale did not believe in fate. He did not believe in mistakes. But looking at her now, he realized something terrifying. The night he should have forgotten was the only night that had ever felt like the beginning of his real life. Sienna Marsh had grown up in a world where silence was not just expected, but required a world where every breath, every decision, every emotion was measured against the ambitions of the man who raised her, Victor Hale titan of industry, self-made billionaire, and the kind of father who believed love was a form of weakness. To the outside world, he was brilliant, ruthless visionary. To Sienna, he was a ticking bomb wrapped in a perfectly tailored suit. She learned young that her life was not really hers. That became clear the day she turned 13 and found a list of universities her father had chosen for her, not based on her interests, but on which political circles they courted. Or the day she turned 16 and overheard him negotiate a future partnership by promising his daughter would be a perfect corporate wife. When she turned 18, he gifted her a penthouse that was beautiful, but felt more like a golden cage. Every detail from the silver-framed photos to the cream-colored rugs was curated by him, not her. Every morning her schedule arrived by email. Every afternoon her father's assistant called to confirm she had completed it. Every evening the unspoken expectation hung in the air. Do not embarrass the family. Do not deviate. Do not choose. Sienna never dared to question it. She moved through life quietly, obediently, gracefully, like someone walking on ice, afraid of cracking beneath the weight of her own desires. Yet beneath of all the careful stillness, a small flame lived inside her, a tiny, rebellious ember she guarded, like a secret, the part of her that wrote poetry in hidden notebooks and whispered dreams into her pillow at night. The part that wanted freedom even if she had no idea what freedom looked like. The night of the storm when she escaped to the rooftop, she had not meant to meet anyone. She had not meant to speak to anyone. She had only needed to breathe. But then Aiden Vale appeared out of the rain, with eyes that looked like they carried their own storm. And somehow she had spoken truths she never meant to say. And then she had done something she never did. She followed her heart instead of her father's expectations one night. One impossible night where she chose herself. And she had left before dawn, not because she regretted it, but because she knew if she stayed, she might never leave at all. Yet none of that mattered now, because as she stood inside the crystal-drenched ballroom of the Manhattan Heritage Fundraiser, twisting her necklace between her fingers, she felt her lungs collapse when she saw him walking toward her. The man from the stairwell. The man who held her like she was breakable, yet worth holding. The man she never thought she would see again. Aiden Vale, and with every step he took, she became more aware of the truth she had been hiding all along. Not just her name, but her world, her father, her lineage, her status as the daughter of the very man destroying his company. Her heartbeat became a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. You should run, a voice whispered, but she couldn't. Her legs refused to move. Something in his eyes kept her trapped, rooted, drawn, like a magnet she never learned how to resist. When he reached her, the noise of the gala faded until it felt like they stood inside an invisible bubble, a quiet corner of the universe. Only they could hear. Aiden looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and recognition, as if she were an apparition made real by sheer force of longing. Sienna. He breathed her name even though she had never told him, and her chest tightened so sharply she almost gasped. She wanted to answer, but her voice had folded in on itself, refusing to cooperate. Her fingers curled tighter around her necklace, the small silver charm digging into her palm, grounding her to a world she wished she did not belong to. The moment was too fragile, too real, too full of the truth she had been trying to run from. So she forced herself to step back, only half an inch, but enough for him to feel it. Enough for her to breathe the lie she needed to survive. I should not be here, she whispered. Aiden's jaw flexed. What does that mean? She shook her head desperately, searching for composure. I should go. He lowered his voice to something dangerously soft. Sienna, don't run again. The words pierced her like a blade, not because he spoke them, but because he meant them. Because he had felt her running, because he remembered it, because he cared more than he should. Her throat tightened. She turned away, intending to disappear into the crowd, but she walked right into a wall. No, not a wall, a man. A man whose presence was a shadow, darker than any storm Victor Hale. He placed a heavy hand on her shoulder, possessive, authoritative, spine-freezing. the kind of touch that said, "You belong to me, not to yourself, not to anyone else." Victor smiled the kind of smile that held knives in every corner. Aiden Vale, what an unfortunate surprise. Aiden stiffened but did not look away from Sienna. Victor's gaze followed his, and his smile sharpened Sienna. "Darling, say hello." His tone was sweet, but the steel beneath it suffocated her. She tried to step back, but his grip tightened just slightly, a quiet warning. For a second she could not breathe. This is it, she thought. This is what a trap feels like. Victor's eyes glittered with the satisfaction of control. "Meet my daughter Sienna Hale." Aiden's face did not move, but something behind his eyes shattered. Not surprise, pain, betrayal. Understanding. The truth collapsed between them, like a monument struck by lightning. Sienna Hale, daughter of Victor Hale, daughter of his enemy. Daughter of the man trying to take everything from him. And the virgin girl he had held, like she mattered more than the world. The world that suddenly grew too small and too loud. Victor continued speaking to Aiden with political politeness, but she couldn't hear the words. Her pulse was too loud, her shame too sharp, her fear too thick. She had wanted to hide her name from him because she had known the truth would ruin everything, because she had known she would lose him. And now, watching the way he stared at her, she felt the loss so deeply, it hurt to stand. Aiden finally spoke, his voice low-controlled, betraying nothing except the storm, drowning quietly inside his chest. "So you are Sienna Hale?" She whispered yes, barely audible. Victor was still talking about mergers and alliances, but neither of them listened. Their eyes held, and the air crackled between them. Not electric as before, but heavy with everything unsaid. Aiden wasn't angry. That was the part that cut deepest. He looked disappointed, betrayed, hurt. In a way she had not anticipated, he had opened a door to her, and she had walked through while hiding a knife behind her back. She whispered, "I am sorry, Aiden. I didn't want you to know like this." His eyes softened painfully, then hardened again into distance. "You should have told me, Sienna." Her hands trembled. "I wanted to. But you were the one thing in my life that wasn't controlled by him. I just wanted one night that was mine." His expression flickered again, torn between reason and feeling, between rivalry and longing. She stepped back this time fully, retreating because she knew she had shattered whatever fragile beginning they had found on that rooftop. She whispered, "I shouldn't have come here, Aiden. I do not belong in your world." He stared at her with something raw in his eyes. "Neither do I belong in yours, Sienna, but you were the only part of it that felt real." Her breath broke. She looked away before the tears fell, knowing that from this moment on, nothing between them would be simple. Nothing would be safe. Nothing would be allowed. Because she was the rival's daughter, the forbidden collision, the mistake fate forced upon them, the secret he wished he didn't want, and the one thing her father could never allow her to choose. Aiden Vale had survived hostile takeovers, lawsuits designed to bleed him dry, political attacks funded by men twice as brutal as Victor Hale, but nothing prepared him for the moment he realized. The girl who had looked at him like he was the first breath she had taken in years was the daughter of the man who would gladly ruin him without losing a full night's sleep. He stood there in the shimmering ballroom as Victor Hale guided Sienna away. Through the crowd, his hand heavy on her back, like possession disguised as protection, and all Aiden could do was watch her disappear between senators and CEOs until the last glimpse of her dark hair vanished behind the archway. He didn't move for several seconds, the shock too sharp, The disbelief, too raw. The betrayal, too personal. The girl who had cried in his arms. The girl who had whispered truths into the dark. The girl who had kissed him like she had been falling all her life, and finally landed somewhere safe. Was Sienna Hale the one woman whose existence alone tore at the very foundation of his world? He turned away before anyone could read his expression and left the balcony, moving into the quieter hallway where the noise of the gala faded into an indistinct hum. He rested a hand against the marble wall, grounding himself as reality settled into his bones. She didn't lie. He told himself she hid what she couldn't say because she was trapped, because she was scared, because she had no control over her life. But another voice whispered, quieter, more dangerous, "And she still left you in the dark." Aiden hated that voice because it wasn't anger speaking. It was hurt, the kind he had not felt since he was young enough to believe promises meant something and people stayed when they cared. Seconds passed, minutes, maybe he didn't know. Then he sensed movement behind him, soft, hesitant, human-shaped vulnerability, wrapped in silk and fear. He didn't need to turn to know it was her. The air changed around her, like the pressure before a storm. Sienna stood a few feet behind him, her breath shallow, the faint tremble in her hands, betraying the composure she was desperately clinging to. "Aiden," she whispered his name like it was both apology and plea. He didn't turn fully, just glanced over his shoulder. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sienna flinched but stepped closer anyway, because she had always moved toward him, even when everything in her life warned her not to. "I didn't know how," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. "I thought if I spoke my name, you would look at me differently, and I would lose the only moment in my life that felt like mine." Her words cracked something inside him. He turned to face her fully this time, and the pain in her eyes was worse than the betrayal. He asked quietly, "You thought your name would change what I saw in you?" She swallowed hard. "Yes, because it always changes everything with everyone." She raised a trembling hand, pressing it against the necklace that hung at her throat. "I wanted one night where I wasn't Victor Hale's daughter. I wanted to be just a girl in the rain, talking to a man who didn't want anything from me." Aiden stepped closer, the storm between them tightening, drawing them into the gravity of a truth neither wanted to confront. "You could have told me." She shook her head, tears gathering helplessly in her lashes. "If I told you I was a Hale, you would have walked away." Aiden didn't deny it, and she knew, and that was the wound that hurt her most. Before he could answer, footsteps echoed down the hall. Victor Hale's voice booming with confidence, laughter echoing beside political allies. Sienna stiffened, fear slicing through her posture like a wire pulled taut. She grabbed Aiden's wrist instinctively, a reflex of desperation. "Please don't start anything with him. Please." Aiden met her gaze, and in her eyes he saw the truth. She lived with daily fear, not of danger but of control she could never escape. Victor rounded the corner, then stopped cold when he saw them. His gaze dropped to their hands still touching, and his expression hardened instantly, icy enough to freeze the air. He didn't speak at first, didn't need to. His silence alone carried threat. Victor stepped closer, placing a firm hand on Sienna's arm. "You are needed inside Sienna." He said it softly, but the steel beneath the words was unmistakable. Aiden straightened, meeting Victor's eyes without flinching. "I didn't realize she needed permission to breathe." Victor's smile was thin, dangerous, sharp as a blade, tucked behind charm. "We both know what your interest in my daughter is. Mr. Vale, whether it is strategy leverage or a convenient weapon, nothing involving you is innocent. Aiden's jaw tightened. I don't use people, Victor. What happened between your daughter and me has nothing to do with business. Victor's laughter was low, dry, unimpressed. Please, you're a Vale. You were born into the currency of power. Weakness is not in your vocabulary. Sienna's grip tightened on Aiden's wrist, her whole body trembling with the need to stop the inevitable clash. I am not a bargaining chip, she whispered. Victor didn't look at her. You are my daughter. That is enough. Aiden wanted to respond, wanted to fight, wanted to pull her behind him and tell Victor she wasn't property. But Sienna gave a tiny, desperate shake of her head, begging him silently not to escalate, so he didn't. Not yet. Victor pulled her away, guiding her back toward the ballroom each step, a chain tugging at her spirit. She didn't resist physically, but her eyes remained locked on Aiden until the last possible second, pleading silently, "Don't give up on me." After they disappeared beyond the archway, Aiden remained frozen in place, lungs tight, heartbeat loud, refusing to let the moment fade. He was not a man who believed in fate. He didn't believe in destiny or signs or the universe pushing two people together. But he believed in patterns, and he recognized one now. Every time she walked away, she looked back. Not because she wanted to, but because she needed someone to see her. Someone to choose, someone to remind her she wasn't invisible behind her father's shadow. That night he couldn't sleep. Not even after returning home, not even after reviewing every move Victor had made against Valeworks in the past year. Not even after convincing himself repeatedly that the smart thing was to let her go. He replayed the tremble in her voice, replayed the way her eyes begged him not to start a war. He couldn't win, replayed the moment Victor's grip on her arm had tightened just slightly possessive, controlling, oppressive. She wasn't free. She had never been free. And Aiden Vale didn't walk away from people who were trapped in lives that were not theirs. He knew that feeling too well. The next morning, the city woke to stock alerts predicting a corporate battle between Valeworks and HaleCorp. But none of that mattered to Aiden as much as the echo of Sienna's whisper. I wanted one moment that was mine. He wanted to give her more than a moment. He wanted to give her a choice. That afternoon, he found himself in a private corner of the Metropolitan Library, where the gala's after-events continued in hushed tones. The room was lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves, gold-lit, quiet, dignified. A place where secrets felt safe. And there she was. Sienna standing between the history shelves, her fingers brushing the spines of books. She wasn't reading her mind clearly miles away. Her shoulders relaxed when she sensed him before she even turned. Aiden. For the first time, her voice wasn't trembling. It was soft, sure, hopeful. It was the voice of someone who felt seen. He stepped toward her, silently drawn by something stronger than rivalry, stronger than reason, stronger than fear. He stopped only when they were close enough for their breaths to touch. "You're hiding," he murmured. She nodded barely. "I needed air, you deserve it," Aiden said. She looked up into his eyes and he saw her entire world written there. Conflict, longing, apology, hope. They stood there suspended in a quiet cinematic space where their worlds didn't matter, where names didn't matter, where rivalry didn't matter, where only truth remained. She whispered Aiden about that night. Before she could finish, he leaned in just slightly, his voice low enough to weave directly into her pulse. That night was real. Sienna, not a mistake, not an escape, not something I regret. It was real. Her lips parted, her eyes softening with the ache of wanting to believe him, but reality seeped in like cold smoke beneath a door. "We can't," she whispered. "My father will destroy you." He moved closer until her back brushed the bookshelf and the air between them turned heavy, charged, trembling. "I'm not afraid of your father, Sienna. I'm afraid of losing the only honest thing that has happened to me in years." Her breath hitched. Her hand rose instinctively, brushing the fabric near his collar as if grounding herself in him. They leaned closer, the heat between them, tightening their lips inches apart, breaths trembling, hearts racing. Then footsteps echoed outside the library. She flinched, stepping back, her eyes wide with fear, as if the moment itself had been stolen from them. They didn't kiss. Not then, but the almost kiss hung between them like lightning waiting for the world to dim before striking. Aiden finally whispered, "This isn't over, Sienna." And for the first time she whispered back, "I hope it isn't." For the next several days, Aiden Vale found himself doing something he had never allowed himself to do. In the middle of a corporate war, he waited, he watched, he listened, not for market shifts, not for stock volatility, not for the next attack Victor Hale was preparing, but for the faintest sign of Sienna Hale moving. Somewhere inside the glittering social battlefield she had been born into. It was absurd, insane, even inexcusable for a man like him to let his mind wander toward a woman whose last name was practically stamped on every threat sent his way. Yet she had become the one secret he could not outrun, a truth he could not bury, a need he could not unfeel. He told himself he was keeping tabs on her because she was in danger, because Victor was escalating, because the city whispered about a new strategic alliance between HaleCorp and several political donors that could rip Valeworks apart. But deep down he knew the real reason. He watched her across boardrooms and charity functions and quiet corners of public buildings was because every time he looked at her, she looked away too quickly, as if afraid someone would see what lay behind her eyes, longing and guilt, and the kind of connection that could burn down two empires. Sienna lived the next days like a ghost, drifting through her father's penthouse, through the Hale offices, through the scheduled lunches and dinners and endorsements, without breathing fully, without seeing color, without hearing anything except the way Aiden had said her name in the library, like he had already memorized it. She tried to bury the memory of his fingers brushing her wrist, the warmth of his breath near her lips, the almost kiss that had nearly broken her open in the quiet shadows of the history aisle. But that memory lived inside her like a heartbeat she could not silence. Every time she entered a room and sensed eyes on her, she feared it was her father's, catching the guilt flickering across her face. But no, Victor Hale never looked at her long enough to notice anything beyond how she served his plans. It was her own reflection that frightened her most, the way she didn't look like herself anymore, the way she looked like someone wanting something she had no right to want. On the fourth day after the library, she saw him again at a private investor luncheon hosted at the top of the Orion Hotel. She had arrived with Victor dressed in steel blue silk, the kind of color meant to signal poise and loyalty. But her heart was hammering wildly because she knew he would be there, and she knew she could not hide forever. She spotted him within seconds, Aiden Vale, standing with two senators speaking, in low, controlled tones, his posture calm, but his eyes flickering with the storm she had left inside him. He saw her. He always saw her faster than she could look away, faster than she could pretend She did not feel him watching. She turned sharply, bracing herself, forcing her breath slow, but her father placed a hand on her back, pushing her toward a small group of men whose smiles were too polished to be honest. "Sienna, darling, Congressman Monroe has been eager to speak to you," Victor announced with pride disguised as affection. The congressman, an older man with a predatory gleam in his eyes, searched for Sienna's hand, and she felt her stomach twist with cold dread. She forced a polite nod, but her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear her father's introduction. "This is my daughter. She is the future of Halecorp, beautiful, brilliant, loyal." The words loyal echoed inside her like a prison gate slamming shut. And then she saw it. Aiden had moved closer, his eyes locked on her father's hand, his jaw clenching tightly enough to fracture stone. Victor turned, noticing only the shift in atmosphere, not its meaning, Avail. Victor said with a thin smile, "We keep running into each other." I wonder why Aiden's gaze didn't drift from Sienna even for a second. His voice was steady, dangerously quiet, perhaps because we move in the same circles, or perhaps because your daughter seems determined to avoid the wrong ones. The implication hung between them sharp enough to draw blood. Victor's smile faded. Sienna felt her breath catch panic rising. "Aiden, what are you doing?" she whispered under her breath. But Aiden did not break his stare. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, a private challenge meant only for Victor. "If you want to use her as a bargaining chip, Hale choose a better opponent." Victor's brows rose. "Oh, I am not bargaining, Vale. I am arranging her future." If anyone should understand the value of strategic alignment, it is you. Aiden's voice dropped colder than winter. "I understand manipulation when I see it." The air thickened. Victor stiffened. Sienna's pulse spiked. But then Victor eased back with a practiced smile, patting Sienna's shoulder like she was nothing more than a decorative asset. "Enjoy the luncheon, dear. You will sit with Congressman Monroe." Sienna's stomach lurched as Victor walked away, leaving her trapped in the expectation of being polite, of being quiet, of being strategic. She lifted her eyes and found Aiden watching her not with pity, not with desire, but with something deeper anger on her behalf. She whispered, "Please don't make this worse, Aiden. Please." He moved closer, just a fraction, just enough for her to feel his presence like a shield. "If I walk away," he murmured, "will you breathe?" She blinked, confused. He repeated softly, "Will you breathe, Sienna?" His words forced a truth from her chest, one she had been terrified to confront. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know how to anymore." Something inside him snapped, not with violence, but with clarity. He turned and walked away, not toward the exit, but toward the back of the room, where a set of glass doors led to a private side terrace, the kind guests rarely noticed. He stood behind the door, waiting silently, and she followed, because she always followed when it came to him. The terrace was empty, the city stretching in every direction, like a dream too wide to hold. They stood in silence, letting the wind swallow the weight of the luncheon. Then he spoke. "Tell me the truth, Sienna. What is he planning with you?" She swallowed, tasting fear and shame and exhaustion. "My father wants me to marry someone powerful, someone useful, someone who strengthens his alliances." She felt her voice crack on the last word. "He doesn't care if I want it. He doesn't care who it hurts." Aiden stared at her as if studying every fracture in her voice. "Your life is yours, Sienna, not his, not anyone's." But she shook her head, tears burning the backs of her eyes. "No, Aiden. It isn't. People like me don't get choices. People like you make them for us. People like him own us." A muscle in Aiden's jaw twitched painfully. He stepped closer, almost touching her but not quite. His restraint was a vow. "Tell me if that night meant nothing to you, and I will walk away." She squeezed her eyes shut, breathing shakily. It meant everything. That was the problem. Aiden exhaled slowly, the confession cutting deeper than any weapon. Victor Hale owned. "Then tell me why you are still letting him decide. Your life for you." She shook her head, trembling. "Because he is my father, and I owe him everything, even if it destroys you." A long silence, a painful silence. Aiden finally whispered, "You are worth more than the world he built on your back." She looked at him through tears, wishing she could believe him. Wishing she were brave enough to choose herself. Wishing she hadn't been born into a family where love was a currency you paid with your freedom. Then the terrace door creaked open. Sienna flinched. Aiden straightened, but it wasn't Victor. It was her father's head of security, scanning the terrace with sharp suspicion. "Sienna, Miss Hale, Victor is requesting you now." Sienna nodded, swallowing the panic, rising like floodwater. She gave Aiden one last look, a shattered silent plea. "I can't." He shook his head gently. "No, Sienna, you won't be able to hide much longer." His voice softened as if wrapping around her heart. She whispered, "I am scared." Aiden replied quietly, "So am I, but for different reasons." She turned and walked away. Her frame small, fragile, trembling, as if every step tore something from inside her. Aiden watched her leave, feeling the truth settle into his bones. If he did nothing, she would disappear into marriage alliances and political cages. If he acted, she would be thrust into a war she never chose. Either way, the secrets that defined them were no longer shadows. They were battlegrounds. That night, he made a decision. He would not lose her. Not to fear, not to her father, not to the world that wanted to own her. If Sienna Hale could not choose for herself yet, Aiden Vale would fight until she had the chance. Aiden Vale was not a man easily unsettled, but the night he learned the truth about Sienna Hale shattered the last piece of emotional distance he had tried to preserve between them. It happened on a quiet Thursday evening long after the Valeworks offices had emptied, and the city outside glowed with its usual neon pulse. Aiden was reviewing confidential reports from his security unit, the kind of intelligence that never appeared on paper and never left his encrypted system. He scanned each page with the detached precision of a man used to mining data for patterns that could cripple a corporation, not a person. But tonight was different because the folder on his desk was titled Hale Internal Movements, and the name Sienna appeared in the second line like it had been waiting to break something in him. His head of security, Marcus Reed, entered without knocking, a privilege only Aiden granted to one or two people. Marcus placed another file on the desk, heavier sealed, ominously stamped with level red. Aiden frowned. Level red meant personal threat, family threat, or emotional asset. He opened it slowly, eyes darkening with each line he read. Sir Marcus said quietly, "There's information inside that you will want to read alone." "I am reading it," Aiden murmured, flipping the next page. And then his breath stopped. A single paragraph, a single detail, a fact that turned the stormy rooftop memory into something else entirely, something sacred, something dangerous. Sienna Hale, age 22. No romantic history, no public dating records, no private ones. And then the line that hit him harder than any business ambush Victor Hale had ever attempted. Subject confirms 0 prior sexual activity. Sienna was a virgin the night she came to him. The night she touched him like he was the first choice she had ever made. The night she whispered questions about a stolen life. The night she kissed him with trembling certainty. Aiden's hand tightened around the edge of the desk, so hard his knuckles went white. Marcus kept his distance, sensing the shift. We verified it through several cross sources, Marcus added cautiously. Her father kept her life under heavy surveillance. There are disturbing levels of control. Aiden barely heard him. He was somewhere else back in that stairwell with her fingers brushing his jaw. Her breath trembling, her voice cracking, as she asked him if he ever felt like his life didn't belong to him. She hadn't just been scared, she had been inexperienced in every sense of the word. Vulnerable. Innocent in ways he had not understood. That night hadn't been a mistake for her. It had been an act of rebellion, of desperation, of trust, and she gave it to him. The realization cut deeper than anything he had felt in years. Not because he felt triumphant, not at all, but because the weight of it pressed against his ribs like an ache he didn't know how to carry. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, are you all right?" Aiden closed the file, slowly, deliberately, his expression unreadable. "Why are you bringing me this?" Because Marcus said carefully, "Victor Hale is preparing to announce her engagement to a political figure. She clearly doesn't want it. And you," he hesitated, "you need to understand the stakes if you intend to intervene." Aiden exhaled sharply. "I don't intend to intervene." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "No, sir, you already have." Aiden didn't answer, because Marcus was right. He was already in too deep. He had crossed the invisible line the moment Sienna whispered his name in the library, the moment she trembled under the pressure of expectation, the moment she cried on the rooftop, and the moment he realized he was the only person in her life who saw her, not her family name, not her political value, not her strategic worth, but her, the girl beneath all of it. He stood abruptly. "Where is she now?" Marcus blinked. "Sir, where is she now?" Marcus checked his phone. Location tracker on her security detail shows she's heading toward Brooklyn Bridge, alone. Aiden didn't hear anything after that. He grabbed his coat and walked out of the building before Marcus could say another word. The night air along the Brooklyn waterfront tasted like storm and steel. Sienna stood near the railing of the bridge, her hair caught in the wind, her eyes reflecting the tremble of city lights on the water below. She looked smaller than he remembered, and yet stronger too, as if heartbreak and rebellion lived side by side inside her chest. Aiden approached quietly, his footsteps soft against the concrete. She didn't hear him at first. She was too lost in her thoughts, too focused on the war inside her. When she finally turned, her breath caught. Aiden. His name left her lips like a confession. "What are you doing here?" His voice was low, steady, too steady for what churned inside him. "I needed to see you." She looked away, gripping the railing tightly. "You shouldn't be here." And yet he stepped closer. "Here I am." A tense silence stretched between them. Her hair whipped against her cheek, her fingers trembling against the cold metal bar. He watched the way she swallowed, the way her breath hitched, the way she seemed 1 second away from breaking. "My father is planning something," she whispered. "He wants to announce my engagement next week." Aiden's jaw tightened. "Do you want that?" She shook her head violently. "No." Aiden stepped closer until he stood just a breath away from her, the wind swirling around them like a living thing. "Tell me something, Sienna," he whispered. "Tell me that night meant nothing to you, and I'll walk away." Her eyes widened. Her throat tightened. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Tears filled her lashes instantly because she could not say the lie he asked for. She could not pretend the night she finally chose herself meant nothing. She could not pretend she wasn't still carrying the warmth of his hands, the safety of his voice, the storm she found shelter in. He watched her reaction, and his face softened with something like heartbreak. Her silence was an answer. Aiden's voice dropped to something gentler than she had ever heard from him. I know what your father expects of you. Sienna's lips trembled. I don't want that life. Aiden exhaled shakily. Then don't choose it. She looked at him with a kind of helplessness that felt like drowning. You don't understand, Aiden. My entire world collapses if I disobey him. Then let it collapse, he said quietly, fiercely, and build something new. A tear slid down her cheek. He raised a hand, slowly giving her every chance to move away. She didn't. His thumb brushed her cheek with the kind of tenderness she had never been given. You deserved choice long before you met me, he murmured. But if you need someone to fight for you while you learn to fight for yourself, I am already here. That broke her. She let out a sound, soft, shattered, beautiful in its honesty. Her forehead dropped to his chest, not a kiss, not a romance gesture, but a collapse of burden, relief, longing. Aiden wrapped his arms around her gently, as if she were the most fragile and most precious thing he had ever held, and maybe she was. The city roared around them, but for a moment there was only two people, finally catching the truth they'd tried so hard to outrun. Sienna whispered against his chest, I'm scared. Aiden held her tighter, I am too. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Of what? Of losing you before I ever get the chance to keep you. And with those words, the world shifted. Not with a kiss, not with fireworks, but with a fragile, undeniable truth. That night wasn't a mistake. It was a beginning. Sienna Hale woke up the next morning, feeling as if she had lived two lives at once. The obedient daughter bound to a dynasty built on fear, and the trembling girl who had stood under the Brooklyn Bridge, wrapped in the arms of a man she was never supposed to love. The city outside her penthouse windows was bright and clean and cruelly normal, but she was not the same girl who had walked into that night. Her heart felt different, louder, unruly, no longer content with silence. Her father, however, was unchanged. Victor Hale sat at the breakfast table, reading 3 newspapers at once, while speaking sharply to 2 advisors. Through his earpiece, Sienna entered quietly, hoping his focus on business would buy her minutes of peace. It didn't. Victor did not even look up as he said, You were out late. The words were soft, but they carried iron. Sienna froze, then forced a breath. I went for a walk. Walking is not on your schedule. He folded a paper, slowly, precision in every movement. Where did you walk? The question wasn't curiosity, it was interrogation. Sienna clasped her hands behind her back so he wouldn't see them shake around the city. Meaningless answer. Victor looked up finally, and his eyes were sharp, the kind that saw weakness like blood in water. We will need tighter control, he murmured to someone on the call. Increase her detail. 2 men at all times, not 1. Sienna's pulse spiked. Dad, I don't need more guards. His gaze sliced through her. You will do what I say, and you will not disappear again. I have important plans for you, Sienna. She swallowed, knowing exactly what that meant. The engagement announcement, the merger disguised as marriage, the political alliances cementing Hale power for the next decade. She whispered, I don't want this. Victor slammed the newspaper down. The table rattled. And since when do your wants dictate anything in this family? His tone went razor soft. If you think I built an empire, so my daughter could wander around city bridges like a lost child, you are mistaken. My decisions stand. You will attend the gala tonight. You will sit beside Congressman Monroe. You will smile. Sienna felt air leave her lungs. One sharp, painful pull. She heard herself say quietly, "I'm not marrying him." Victor froze as if she had spoken a forbidden word. His stare turned deadly. "What did you just say?" She forced her voice steady. "I said, I'm not marrying him." Victor stood slowly, like a man preparing for war. His voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "Who put this idea in your head?" She shook her head, backing away slightly. "No one, you cannot think for yourself, Sienna." He stepped closer, towering. "You are 22. You have no concept of the world. You have no understanding of how to protect this family. Everything I have poured into your future can crumble in one moment of foolishness. You will not embarrass me." She flinched at the word embarrass, as if her entire existence hinged on never becoming that. Victor exhaled sharply, regaining control. "You will do tonight as planned." End of discussion. Sienna walked out before tears fell. She locked herself in her room and slid to the floor, shaking. The walls around her felt too tight, too familiar, too much like a trap. Her phone buzzed. Aiden. When she saw his name, her breath steadied despite everything Aiden texted. "Are you safe?" She typed yes, then erased it, typed no, then erased again. Then 3 words slipped out before she could overthink. "I'm not okay," he replied instantly. "Where are you?" She hesitated, then sent the truth home. He wrote, "Stay there, I'm coming." Her heart dropped. "No, Aiden, you can't, my father." He answered, "Don't care, I'm coming." 2 minutes later, her phone buzzed again. A message from her father's security system. "Motion alert, penthouse lobby." Sienna ran to her window and looked down at the street below. Aiden Vale was standing at her building entrance. Hands in his pockets, expression carved from storm and steel. Victor's security detail confronted him tense, ready for escalation. Sienna's whole body froze. "Aiden, don't," she whispered, even though he couldn't hear. Her phone rang. It was Aiden. She answered, breathless, terrified. "Aiden, leave please, my father." Aiden's voice was steady, shockingly gentle. "I'm not here to fight him, Sienna. I'm here to see you." That terrified her more. She whispered, "If he sees you here, he will lose his mind." "I know," Aiden answered, "but you are standing alone in that penthouse with a man planning your life. Like you are a stock he can trade. I won't let you face that alone." Her knees weakened, and she had to grip the window frame to stay upright. There was a commotion in the lobby, then silence. Then a knock on her door, a single, undeniable knock. Sienna's heart nearly stopped. Aiden's voice came from the other side. "Sienna, it's me." She opened the door slowly, and he stepped inside quickly, closing it behind him before the guards could intervene. He took one look at her, and the composure he'd held downstairs shattered. Aiden cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing tears she hadn't realized had already fallen. "Sienna, talk to me. What happened?" She shook her head, unable to breathe. He pulled her into his arms, wrapping her against his chest like she was something precious worth defending. His heartbeat was steady against her cheek, grounding her, anchoring her after a morning of drowning. He murmured into her hair, "I'm here, you don't have to hold yourself alone. Not with me, not ever." Her fingers curled into his shirt, clutching him as if he were the only solid thing left. She whispered against his chest, "My father is forcing the engagement. He wants me to sit with Monroe tonight." and he said I don't get to choose anything. Aiden's jaw tightened. He lifted her chin, so she had to meet his eyes. Sienna Hale, look at me. You always get a choice. She shook her head. I don't. He moved closer, until their breaths mingled, until the truth between them vibrated through the air. You do with me. His voice deepened, soft but fierce. I will protect you. I will stand between you and whatever he throws at you. But I need you to tell me what you want, not what he forces you. What do you want? Sienna's throat closed. The truth trembled on her tongue. Impossible to hold back any longer. I want you. Her voice cracked, and his breath caught sharply. His hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer. Not possessively, but like a man finally touching something he'd been afraid to want. Too intimately, too deeply, too dangerously. For a moment they simply breathed, holding each other like the world was burning outside. Then the front door slammed open. Victor Hale stormed in. Flanked by 2 guards, his face a storm of disbelief and fury. Sienna Aiden pulled her behind him instantly, protective instinct overriding every business rule, every line drawn between them. Victor's voice boomed. How dare you enter my home? Vale, Aiden didn't flinch. You weren't here. Perhaps someone needed to look after your daughter. Victor's nostrils flared. You will leave immediately. Before I end your career, your company, and every future you have. Aiden stepped forward, calm, lethal. You can take everything from me if you want, Hale, but you don't get to own her. Victor's face turned cold as stone. She is my daughter. She is mine to decide for, not anymore. Aiden murmured. Sienna grabbed his arm. Terrified Aiden. Please don't. Victor's gaze snapped to her. You will. Come to the gala tonight as planned, or I swear on everything I have built, you will regret it. Sienna froze, torn between terror and fury. Aiden stood firm. No, she won't. Victor turned sharply. If she disobeys me, she loses everything. Her home, her inheritance, her security, her future. Aiden's voice dropped to something raw. Then she will build a new future with me. Victor's expression twisted with hatred. So this is about love now, Vale. How poetic, how naive. Aiden didn't look away. It's about choice, something you never gave her. For the first time, Victor faltered, only a second. But Sienna saw it, saw the crack, saw the shock, that someone would dare speak truth to him. Her breath trembled. Aiden, she whispered, scared, but alive, for the first time in years. Victor straightened, recovering his composure enough to spit the final warning. If you walk out with him, Sienna, you are no longer my daughter. A heavy silence crushed the room. Sienna's entire life hung on a thread woven from fear and longing. Aiden extended a hand slowly, his voice low, steady. Certain, Sienna, don't choose for him. Choose for you. For a moment she couldn't breathe. She looked at her father. She looked at Aiden. She looked at the life that had caged her and the life she could build. She whispered one trembling truth. I'm not yours to own. Victor's face, drained of color. She placed her hands slowly into Aiden's, and in that single movement, 2 empires shifted forever. The Hale estate in the Hamptons had always looked like a fortress, dressed up as luxury, a masterpiece, carved from marble, and old money guarded by security teams who moved like shadows across the manicured lawns. But tonight it felt different. The air hummed with tension, the kind that slips beneath the skin before anyone recognizes it as danger. Inside the mansion glowed with gold chandeliers and the hum of political power buzzing with guests who arrived, dressed to display influence and alliances rather than beauty. The engagement announcement had been engineered to look accidental, but everyone knew Victor Hale never did anything by accident. Sienna arrived in a silver gown that shimmered like broken starlight, escorted by 2 guards who flanked her like prison walls. She held her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her breath shallow, her pulse frantic, as she stepped into a room where every smile felt like a cage snapping shut. Conversations halted the moment she entered. The congressman she was meant to marry, Charles Monroe, stood near the podium, his polished smile far too proud for a man twice her age. He approached her with the confidence of someone promised something they never deserved. "Sienna," he said warmly, as if he owned her name. "You look stunning tonight." She swallowed hard. "Thank you." Victor Hale approached seconds later, placing a hand on her shoulder in that familiar controlling way, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Remember what is at stake." Sienna's stomach tightened. Her father nodded toward the stage, signaling her to prepare. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. She wanted to shatter every expectation placed upon her like chains. But she stood still because everyone she knew was watching, and none of them knew she had already chosen a different life, only hours earlier. Aiden's life, a whisper at the far side of the room, made her heart stutter. "He is here. Who let him in?" Nobody knew, but of course he was. Aiden Vale did not surrender when the stakes were highest. He entered quietly without dramatic flair, wearing a black suit that cut through the room with the sharpness of a blade. The moment Sienna saw him, her breath disappeared entirely. He looked different tonight, not defeated, not hesitant, but certain, with a fire in his eyes that made her knees weaken. He did not hide. He did not step back. He crossed the hall with silent purpose, his gaze locked only on her. Sienna's pulse thundered. "Aiden, no, you can't be here, my father will." And then Victor saw him. The room stilled like a held breath. The music faltered, guests turned. Monroe stiffened with irritation. Victor stepped forward, jaw clenched, his voice cold. "Vale." Aiden didn't waver. "Hale, what are you doing in my home?" Aiden's voice was level but charged with electricity. "The same thing you are, protecting someone I care about." A ripple of shock moved through the guests. Victor's eyes darkened. "You are not welcome here." Aiden looked at Sienna, and yet she is. That broke the fragile balance of the night. Victor stepped between them. "You will leave now before you ruin everything." Aiden held his ground. "Not until she tells me she wants me gone." Sienna felt the world tilt, every gaze pinning her in place. Her father radiating fury, Monroe watching her like a lost asset, the cameras hidden around the gala, capturing every angle of scandal, waiting to explode online. The pressure suffocated her. Victor leaned in, whisper soft venom. "Don't you dare embarrass me." "Sienna, you will go on stage, you will smile, you will announce your engagement." Aiden's voice cut through her panic. "Tell me the truth, Sienna, what do you want?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out because she wanted him. But the world around her demanded something else. Monroe stepped forward, smirking as if Aiden was irrelevant. "I believe the lady has responsibilities tonight." Aiden turned to him with a calm that chilled the room. "She is not property, Congressman. She owes you nothing." Victor snapped enough. His hand tightened around Sienna's arm so hard she flinched. The action was small but visible enough to ignite Aiden. Aiden moved fast, not violently but decisively, placing himself between Sienna and her father, his voice low and lethal. "Do not touch her like that again." He said it loud enough for every powerful person in the room to hear. A collective gasp rippled. Someone whispered, "Oh dear God, he just threatened Victor Hale." Victor's face contorted with rage. You crossed the line, Vale. You think you can walk in here and challenge me. Aiden's voice sharpened. I am not challenging your empire. I am challenging the way you treat your daughter. Victor's control cracked. How dare you? Aiden leaned in. You built everything except the ability to love her. Victor went still, the words slicing deeper than he expected. The silence that followed felt like the calm before a bomb detonated. And then it happened. Victor signaled his head of security. They moved in instantly, surrounding Aiden, forming a human perimeter, like they intended to escort him out by force. The room descended into chaos. Voices rose, phones lifted to record guests, whispered intrusion. Scandal, forbidden affair, heirs war. 2 guards grabbed Aiden's arms, preparing to drag him away. Sienna gasped. Aiden. He didn't resist. He only looked at her, calm, steady, present. If you want me to leave, he whispered, I will go. Her heart cracked. Victor barked, Sienna, say it. Tell him to leave. All eyes shifted to her. The girl raised in glass walls, the girl trained to obey. The girl always told to choose ambition over self. Aiden held her gaze, his expression heartbreaking in its softness. Say the word, Sienna, and I walk away forever. Silence, heavy, brutal, slicing through her oxygen. She opened her mouth, trying to speak, but it wasn't words that came out. It was a sob. She shook her head, tears spilled, and that tiny gesture broke the entire room. Aiden shoved the guards off with a force they weren't prepared for. Not an attack, but a refusal to be caged by men who didn't know her. In the chaos, Sienna stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong enough to reach him. Don't go. A collective gasp swept the hall. Victor's face hardened into pure fury. Guards, restrain her, he snarled. They moved toward her, ready to drag her away, but Aiden moved faster, sweeping her behind him, shielding her with his body, like he had done it his entire life. Aiden's voice thundered across the gala. If you touch her, I swear I will burn every inch of this empire down. The guests froze, shocked by the violence in his tone. Not physical, but emotional, a declaration of war. Victor hissed, You dare threaten me? Vale, I dare protect her. Aiden shot back. Monroe tried to intervene. This is absurd. Sienna belongs. Aiden snapped around. She belongs to no one. Sienna clutched the back of Aiden's jacket, shaking, unable to breathe through the explosion around her. Victor shouted, She is my daughter. She will do as I decide. Aiden turned slowly, his eyes filled with something fierce and unyielding. Then you are not worthy of her. The room shook metaphorically with those words. Victor lunged forward, but security pulled him back, realizing the cameras were on the entire scene. Now the internet already seconds away from devouring this. And then in the middle of the chaos, Sienna stepped out from behind Aiden and faced her father. Her voice was so soft it stopped everyone. Dad, I am not an investment. I am not a weapon. I am not a bargaining chip. I am your daughter. And you never once asked me what I wanted, Victor froze. The room silenced, even the music cut. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. What do you want, Sienna? Victor asked through clenched teeth, as if daring her to defy him. She looked at Aiden, looked at the life she was supposed to inherit, looked at the life she could choose, trembling, breathing, finally alive. And she whispered, I want to choose myself. Victor's eyes widened, not in shock, but in realization. The truth he had feared had finally arrived. She stepped back, reaching blindly for Aiden's hand. Aiden caught it, wrapping his fingers around hers with a protectiveness that made something inside her heal. Victor roared, You step out that door and you are no longer my daughter. Aiden squeezed her hand. Say the word, Sienna. Say it, and I will take you away from here right now. She looked at her father one last time and whispered, I am done being owned. Victor shattered. Sienna and Aiden walked out together, past security, past cameras, past the empire that had suffocated her since birth. And behind them the entire night collapsed into chaos. When Sienna stepped out of the Hale mansion, with Aiden's hand wrapped firmly around hers, she thought the hardest part was behind them, but she could not have been more wrong, because walking away from an empire built on intimidation was one thing, surviving the consequences of it was something else entirely. The night air outside the gala hit her like a shock, the sound of waves crashing onto the rocky Hampton shore, blending with distant sirens and shouting from inside the mansion as Victor Hale lost control for the first time in his life. Aiden didn't slow his pace until they reached the car waiting at the edge of the estate, invisible behind tinted windows, and a private security team that had been watching the unfolding chaos from a safe distance. He opened the back door, guiding her inside, gently but firmly, his eyes never leaving the mansion, as if expecting Victor to storm out and drag her back by force. Once inside the car, the door shut with a soft thud, sealing her into a silence that felt heavier than anything she had ever experienced. Her breathing was uneven, her hands trembling so violently she had to tuck them under her thighs. Aiden sat beside her, turning slightly, his eyes searching her face with concern so raw it made her chest ache. "Are you hurt?" he whispered. She shook her head. "No." "Are you scared?" She swallowed yes, but not of you. He exhaled shakily, pulling her into his arms. She melted instantly, bearing her face into his chest, inhaling the clean, warm scent of him, grounding herself in the reality that she had chosen him, chosen herself, chosen freedom. Aiden's hand slid into her hair, his touch gentle, soothing, protective in a way she had never known. "You did the bravest thing I've ever seen," he murmured. Sienna let out a broken whisper. It didn't feel brave, it felt like drowning. He kissed the top of her head softly. "Then let me help you breathe." The car drove through the night, cutting through dark roads toward Manhattan, the lights of the city growing clearer the further they left the Hamptons behind. But Sienna's heartbeat didn't calm. She felt the weight of her father's last words pressing into her ribs. Heavy, suffocating, final. "You are no longer my daughter." The sentence replayed on a brutal loop. "No longer my daughter, no longer my daughter." The worst part wasn't the threat, it was how easily he said it. Aiden felt her stiffen. He pulled back, tilting her chin up with gentle fingers. "Sienna, look at me." She hesitated, afraid of falling apart. "Look at me," he repeated, voice low, warm, steady. She did. Her eyes filled instantly. Aiden brushed a tear with his thumb, his jaw tightening with emotion. "I know his words hurt." She choked out. "They weren't just words, Aiden. He meant them. He meant every one." Aiden pulled her closer again, wrapping her in his arms until she could feel his heartbeat against her cheek, a steady rhythm anchoring her. "Give him time, Sienna. You walked away from the identity he built for you." Of course he reacted like a man threatened, but he will realize eventually. She cut him off with a whisper. "Aiden, he doesn't love me. He loves control. He loves legacy. He doesn't love me." Aiden stilled. His breath trembled against her hair before he whispered, "Then let me love you." The words hung between them, fragile, beautiful, dangerous. Sienna's heart squeezed painfully Aiden. He pressed his forehead to hers, not forcing, just offering. I'm not asking you to say it back. I just need you to know you aren't walking away into emptiness. You walked towards something too. Tears slipped down her cheeks. One of them landed on his thumb. He froze, then kissed it away gently. When they finally reached Manhattan, Aiden brought her to his penthouse, a quiet sanctuary of glass and skyline, a world away from the marble prison she had been raised in. The elevator doors opened directly into his living room. Soft lights illuminating clean lines, dark wood gentle art, and an entire wall of windows overlooking the city. Like 1,000 burning lights reflected in water, Sienna shivered not from cold, but from the realization that she had never been anywhere that felt so open, so hers. Aiden noticed immediately. He took her hand, leading her inside, as if guiding someone learning to walk again. She stopped in the center of the room, turning slowly, taking it all in, the stunning view, the polished floors, the quiet, the freedom, she whispered. I don't deserve this. Aiden stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin near her shoulder. You deserve more than this, Sienna. You deserve peace. She leaned into him, letting the tension leave her body for the first time all night. But peace did not last, because Victor Hale was not a man who accepted loss, not a daughter, not a fight, not a billionaire, stealing both from under his nose. The storm arrived at dawn. Sienna woke to the sound of Aiden's phone vibrating relentlessly across the nightstand. Aiden reached for it, still half asleep. Sienna's head on his shoulder, her arm draped across him in a way that made his heart ache with tenderness. His expression changed instantly when he saw the caller ID, Marcus. Aiden answered quietly. What is it? Marcus's voice crackled through the line. Hale issued a statement. Aiden stiffened. His hand tightened around Sienna's waist. What kind of statement? Marcus exhaled heavily. He's telling the media you manipulated his daughter. He's calling you predatory, reckless, dangerous. He's painting her as confused and emotionally unstable under your influence. Sienna froze. The world tilted. A low, nauseating dread washed over her. Aiden sat up instantly, anger turning his eyes sharp. Did he put her name in that statement? Marcus hesitated. Then sorry, sir, yes. Sienna inhaled sharply, tears forming instantly. He's ruining me, she whispered, voice cracking. He's ruining you, Marcus continued. And sir, one more thing. Hale Corp Legal filed an emergency petition to restrict your contact with her, claiming emotional coercion. Sienna's breath collapsed into a sob. Aiden pulled her into his arms, rubbing slow circles on her back, while fury burned beneath his skin. This is retaliation. He knows we walked out. He knows she chose me. Marcus's voice hardened. He is panicking, sir. He's losing control of the narrative. Sienna's voice shook as she whispered, This is my fault, Aiden. My father is doing this because of me. Aiden cupped her face, gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. Don't you dare blame yourself, Sienna. Don't you dare. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her trembling hands, every touch grounding, pulling her back into the safety of his presence. Marcus added cautiously, Sir, there is a way to protect her, but it won't be easy. Aiden frowned. Tell me. Marcus spoke carefully. Something symbolic, something public, something that proves she is with you by her choice. Not manipulation, not coercion. She must show the world herself. Aiden's heart dropped to his stomach. He knew what Marcus was implying, but he didn't want Sienna pushed into anything. But Sienna looked up, eyes still filled with tears, but voice steady. Tell me what I need to do. Marcus said softly, The media is already tearing you apart, Sienna. The only way to stop it is to tell the truth yourself, to show them you chose to leave him, not that you were taken. Aiden whispered. You don't owe the world anything, Sienna. You don't have to. She shook her head. I can't let him destroy you, Aiden. Not when you fought for me. She sat up straighter, wiping her tears, breathing with new strength for the first time since she left the mansion. Her voice steadied. I want to speak. I want to tell them myself. Aiden stared at her, pride and fear clashing inside him. Sienna, are you sure? She nodded. Yes, if I don't stand now, I'll never be free. Aiden pulled her close again, pressing his lips to her temple, then her hair, then her forehead, whispering fiercely, Then I am with you every second, every breath, every step. And as the sun lifted over Manhattan, spilling gold across the skyline, two people braced themselves, not for war against a corporation, but a war against a legacy, a war for love, a war for choice, a war neither could win alone, but together they might survive it. 1 year later, Manhattan glowed beneath the soft amber light of early evening, the skyline stretching endlessly, like a map of everything Sienna had learned to believe in, and everything she had reclaimed. The Valeworks penthouse was quiet, except for the faint hum of the city below and the rustle of papers on the kitchen counter where Sienna stood reviewing the final draft of a scholarship proposal, a document that now represented her life's purpose rather than her father's plans. The Hale Legacy Scholarship for women seeking freedom from familial control. Her name was on every page. Her signature sealed the final decision. It still stunned her sometimes that this was real, that she now had the authority to build what she believed in, instead of being the object someone else built upon. Behind her, Aiden leaned against the marble island, watching her with the softest smile, the kind that reached his eyes slowly, fully, deeply, like a man who no longer feared feeling too much. He had traded boardrooms for balance and sleepless nights, for soft mornings where she woke tangled in his arms sometimes, on the couch, sometimes in bed, sometimes standing by the window when he came from behind and wrapped himself around her like she was home. 1 year had changed them more than they expected. The scandal that once threatened to destroy them became a catalyst instead of fire that burned away the lies, revealing the truth for the world to see. Sienna had spoken in front of cameras, trembling, but determined to telling the world she left on her own, that she chose herself, that she chose freedom, that she chose truth. Not once did she mention Aiden's name. She protected him even when he had risked everything for her, and the world listened. Women listened. Reporters listened. Investors listened. Her father did not. Victor Hale watched his empire wobble under scrutiny. His legacy questioned, his controlling behaviors exposed. He disappeared from the public eye for months, and in those months he faced his own unraveling, surrounded, not by power, but by silence. When he finally reached out weeks later, it wasn't with threats but with a handwritten letter delivered to Sienna's new office in a simple white envelope. I do not ask forgiveness. I ask for help, he wrote. I am seeking therapy for the first time in my life, but I do not know where to begin. Please tell me how to understand the damage I caused. Sienna cried for an hour, the letter trembling in her hands, before folding it gently, placing it in a drawer. She was not yet ready to open fully. Healing was slow, but it was happening. Aiden stepped behind her now, wrapping his arms around her waist, kissing the back of her neck softly. Sienna whispered, "You're distracting me." "Good." He murmured against her skin, his voice warm, low, teasing. You said you were done working for the night 10 minutes ago. She leaned back into him, eyes closing briefly, letting the solid warmth of him soothe the small exhaustion buzzing under her ribs. It's a big week, she whispered. I know, Aiden replied thoughtfully. The first gala for your scholarship, you should be proud. She turned in his arms, looking up at him, her fingers brushing the collar of his shirt. You're coming right always. He kissed her forehead, letting his lips linger there, a quiet promise, then pulled back slightly, studying her face. You look tired, Sienna. You've been pushing too hard. She sighed, resting her head on his chest. I just want it to be perfect, Aiden. He stroked her hair gently. It will be because it's yours, not because it's perfect. She smiled softly, realizing he was right. He usually was about things that mattered. They spent the next hour preparing dinner, a ritual they'd built over the past year, their hands brushing as they chopped vegetables, debated over recipes, added too much garlic, laughed about Aiden burning the chicken last week, and Sienna insisting it tasted fine, even though her eyes watered from the smoke. They moved around each other effortlessly, a slow dance learned through hundreds of evenings spent choosing each other. When the meal was ready, they ate by the window, overlooking Manhattan, the city shimmering beneath them like a living constellation. After dinner, Sienna walked to the far side of the penthouse, where the balcony overlooked the East River, the wind cool against her skin, carrying the faint scent of rain. This view was where everything had changed, where Aiden had once stood alone, wrestling with the memory of a girl on a rooftop, thinking he'd never find her again. She heard the balcony door slide open. Aiden joined her silently, slipping his hand into hers, their fingers interlacing naturally. What are you thinking? He asked softly. She looked at the skyline, the buildings glowing like embers against a darkening sky. I was thinking about who I used to be. And now she exhaled slowly, feeling the weight and lightness of the truth. I'm not afraid anymore. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You never needed to be afraid, he whispered. You just needed someone to stand with you until you realized you could stand on your own. She let the words settle in her chest, warm, steady healing. Aiden had never tried to control her, never tried to claim her, never tried to own her. He simply stayed, and in staying he taught her how to choose herself. She stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest, listening to the quiet, steady rhythm of his heart. Aiden, yes. Do you ever regret any of it? His arms tightened around her, pulling her impossibly close. Not 1 second. Why he pressed his lips to her hair. Because that night I met you, I thought it would be a mistake. And instead, he whispered, it became the moment everything in my life began to make sense. Tears rose in her eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming tenderness of being seen. Aiden lifted her chin gently and kissed her soft, slow, full of promise. Not urgency. A kiss that told her she was safe, that she was loved, that she was free. When they finally parted, she whispered, I love you, Aiden Vale. His breath caught, as if he had been waiting a lifetime to hear it. He rested his forehead against hers, voice shaking slightly. I love you, Sienna Hale, always. The world behind them faded, the city lights, the hum of traffic, the weight of the past dissolving into the night. Only 2 people remained, 2 hearts no longer fighting to escape their own shadows. 2 souls learning how to build something together, not perfect, not easy, but real. Months later, at the first scholarship gala, Sienna stood on stage, elegant, composed, radiant, as she addressed a room full of women who knew what it felt like to be silenced, controlled, minimized. She spoke of freedom, of courage, of reclaiming one's voice. She spoke of rebuilding life brick by brick, choice by choice, breath by breath. And from the front row, Aiden watched her with the quiet adoration of a man who knew he would never be the center of her universe, and didn't need to be, because being the place she returned to at the end of every day was enough. After the gala ended, after photos, after interviews, after donors shook her hand with admiration and gratitude, Sienna found him leaning against a marble pillar, hands in pockets, eyes soft in the way only she ever saw. He pushed away from the pillar, walking toward her slowly, deliberately, like she was the only one in the room, even when 100 people stood between them. When he reached her, he cupped her waist, lifting her off the ground, slightly as he kissed her forehead, proud beyond words. "You did it," he whispered. She smiled against his lips. "No," she whispered, "we did it." And as the applause faded, as the lights dimmed, as the city night wrapped around them, they walked out hand in hand into a future they were building, not from the remnants of a broken dynasty, but from the quiet, enduring truth that love was not the storm, it was the shelter. If you are still here, listening to the very last heartbeat of this story, then maybe you felt it too. Maybe something in Aiden's journey or Sienna's courage reminded you of the battles you have faced, or the choices you were never allowed to make, or the moment you finally said enough and chose yourself even if your voice trembled when you did it. Stories like this do not just belong to billionaires or penthouses or city skylines. They belong to anyone who has ever felt trapped by expectations, anyone who has ever tasted fear and still reached for hope, anyone who has ever thought they were too small to change their own destiny. And if you stayed through every twist, every collision, every whisper between these two characters, then you understand something important. Love is not about perfection. Love is not about fairy tales. Love is not about grand gestures reserved for the rich. Love is about choosing someone even when life tells you it would be easier to walk away. Love is about standing beside someone, not above them, not behind them, but right beside them while they learn how to stand on their own. And maybe this story made you believe again that the right person does not complete you. They free you. They don't rewrite your life. They hand you the pen. They don't own your choices. They honor them. They don't take away your fears. They help you look them in the eye until fear becomes something softer, something manageable, something that no longer controls the shape of your days. If you felt something, if even one line or one moment made your chest tighten, or made you pause your scrolling, or made you whisper, "Oh, I know that feeling," then let me ask you for one small thing right now. Take a second to comment below. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me which part of this story stayed with you. The rooftop, the stairwell, the forbidden kiss in the garden, or the moment Sienna finally chose herself because your comments, your voice, your presence here helps this little storytelling channel grow. And when you engage, when you type that one sentence or one emoji or one thought, you help push this story into the hands of someone who might need it tonight. Someone who might be sitting alone in their bedroom, feeling stuck, feeling unseen, feeling like they do not get to choose. And maybe your comment will be the thing that leads them here, to this story, to this reminder that freedom is possible, that love is possible, that healing is possible. And if you want to walk with us through more stories like this, cinematic, emotional, romantic, full of tension and tenderness, full of flawed people, trying their best, full of endings that feel earned, not forced, then hit that subscribe button, because we are just getting started. Every day someone new finds this channel. Someone new leaves a comment saying, "I needed this today." Someone new sends a message saying, "I thought I was the only one who felt that way." And your support makes that possible. So like this video if it touched, you share it if someone in your life needs it, and subscribe if you want to stay for the next story. Because trust me, the next one is coming, and it is even deeper, even more emotional, even more breathtaking than this one. A story where love becomes the one thing strong enough to pull two broken people back from the edge. Until then, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for choosing this channel. In a world full of noise and distractions, your presence is a gift. This is Emma's Stories. And if tonight's tale meant something to you, I hope you will stay for the next one.